In the last video, we examined the difference between actions and filters. We learned that the key differences have to do with taking an action or doing something at a certain point versus modifying the data. Now, let's take a look at some common examples of actions and filters. WordPress developer Adam Brown has probably the most referenced and comprehensive listing of WordPress hooks. On his site, we could see all of the different action and filter hooks that WordPress offers. Let's go ahead and pull out a few of these and look at them in more detail. Some of the common action hooks include WP and Q scripts, admin head, widgets init, and customize register. Let's start with WP and Q scripts. This is actually something you've worked quite a bit with if you've gone through and built your own WordPress themes. If we take a look at our example file, we could see that we're working with the add action WP and Q scripts, and it's taking a function as its parameter. Inside of that function, we're enqueuing our style sheets for the front-end CSS of our plugin. The next action hook we'll look at is admin head. This allows you to do something very similar to displaying the CSS on the front end of the site, but admin head allows us to do this on the back end of the site. If we take a look at this example code, we could see that just like in the previous example, we're using the WP and Q style, writing our own custom function, and calling that function. However, we're attaching it to the hook admin head instead of the WP and Q scripts that we used in the previous example. If you were to go into any basic WordPress install and look under WP admin, you would find a file called admin-header. If we were to search through this file and look for admin head, we could see that it calls the action and says do action admin head right here. So we could see that the hook we're pulling in runs inside of the admin header file right here. The next hook we'll look at is widgets init. You'll probably remember from building custom themes how to create a WordPress widget. We'll be creating a widget in our plugin, but we'll be doing it slightly differently than how we created it when building a theme. Let's take a look at the example code. We could see that we're hooking in to widgets init, and we're writing our own custom function that registers a widget. The last action hook we'll look at is customize register. What this hook helps us do is add customization options that people could use from within the customize option for a given theme. If you haven't seen this in action, activate something like the WordPress 2012 theme and click on the link for customize. You could see that on the left we have different sections with different options for how to customize the look of our site. The customize register hook lets us do this for our own themes that we're creating. We wouldn't use it as likely in a plugin, but it's still a good example of an action hook in practice. If we look at this simple example, we could see that we're working with the customize register hook, and again we're writing our own custom functions. Although the note here points out that when we pass in the WP customize object, we get access to these specific methods that help us build out the customization page. On the WordPress codex for customize register, there's a more detailed example of how some of these methods are put into use. We could see here that they're giving examples of how to customize the theme using text input, radio input, checkboxes, etc. Note that all of these examples call a custom function to take an action when WordPress triggers a specific hook while it's running. Now, let's look at a few example filters. Excerpt More determines how a body of content is cut off if there's more content than the excerpt allows to display. Traditionally, you'd see a ... at the end of an excerpt when it gets to the point where it's running Excerpt More. However, on sites, you'll often want to customize this to do something like, say, Read More. In our Excerpt More example here, we could see that we're writing our own custom function and pulling in the More object, which is allowing us to do things like get the link to whatever it is that we want more about. Then we pull it all together and we hook it to the Excerpt More filter. We could see that we're not really taking an action here, but we're more returning something different than what was originally going to be displayed. The content filter does exactly what you would think it would. It gives us the ability to edit or manipulate the default content that's going to display on the screen. We talked previously about appending social sharing widgets to the end of post content. Here's a simplified example of how we could go about that. So the first thing we're going to do is we'd create our own function and pass into it the object for content, just like we passed in the object for more in the previous example. Then we'd run a short conditional statement to make sure that we're actually displaying on a single post or single page, as well as running within the loop on the page. If these two aren't met, we could deal with some possibly strange results of how our content is displayed. Then we would insert in our social sharing code, append it to the content, and then return that out hooked to the content filter. The comments template could also be used in a similar way to help display social messages within your comments on your blog or news section. What this filter allows you to do is use your own custom comments template instead of the one that comes default with WordPress. This is something that you could actually do with a template tag directly in your theme. However, since we're working from the plugin perspective, we could see how this could also be used programmatically to override something that's inside of a theme if we want to add that extra level of functionality with our plugin. You'll notice that in all of these examples, we used either add action or add filter. Note, though, that there's also a remove action and a remove filter that exists for when we want to remove either a third-party or native action or filter. We won't really use any of these for this project, but you should know that they exist.